Welcome back to another episode of the Rebecca Adehill Show. I am so excited to be bringing you a very special conversation today as we are launching into a new season of the show called Voices of Impact. Over the years, I have had the opportunity to cross paths with some of the most incredible humans that have expanded and impacted me in one way or another. So I think it's only fair that I bring some of that magic to you guys as well. A couple of weeks ago, I went to an event and I bumped into someone who I had never met before, but has one of the most captivating, authentic energies. And little did I know that this person made his first debut into the NRL at the age of 17. He bought his first house at the age of 20. Unfortunately, he had to medically retire at 24, but since then, he has landed an incredible job where he now helps other professional athletes as they transition out of the NRL. He's an advocate for mental health. He has a podcast that is making huge waves in the online world. He studied psychology, the list goes on. He's just the most incredible human. So with that being said, I would like to welcome Keegan Hipgrave to the show.
Rebecca, thank you so much for having me. That was quite the intro. I think that's the nicest thing anyone's ever said about me.
Oh, stop it.
How you going? Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to have this conversation, and especially on a Sunday.
What else would we be rather doing on a Sunday, you know?
There is no place I'd rather be.
And you've created such a beautiful space here. I feel so comfortable. We've got a beautiful little coffee in front of us. I feel like we've already done a podcast before this.
I know, I agree. Yeah. The best kind of Sunday session, my opinion.
In the morning.
We met at an event a couple of weeks ago.
Valley Eyewear.
Yes.
Shout out MC. Beautiful, beautiful event. Beautiful space they've got in James Street as well.
I'm so impressed with the whole design, the fit out, just the event, all the people that were there. It was, you know what was really cool? It kind of wasn't even about the eyewear and the sunglasses. It was just about people coming together, celebrating another person's success, getting together, connecting. It was such a good night.
And I think we were talking about it before, like that's the beautiful thing about the Gold Coast at the moment is that everyone's doing really cool things, whether it's in eyewear and fashion, or it could be in the podcast space or fashion labels and cafes and restaurants. And you would have seen the crew that were in there, like incredible people all in their own right, but such beautiful people, right? Like, yes. And everyone was so happy to help each other. And it was just such a good night where crew were just coming together. Mm-hmm. They were just having good conversation. You get to see a couple friendly faces and it's just cool to bring crew and community together.
Yeah, I think it's so important when you go to places like that. I always say that I like to look for opportunities when I go to places like that, because you never know who you're going to bump into. You never know who you're going to connect with, what conversation you're going to have. And I said to my brother, who was with me on the night as well, and I said, I just have a feeling that I'm going to bump into some incredible people and we're going to have some really cool conversations with some awesome humans. And then I bumped into you.
And we had a beautiful chat. It was cool because I'd seen you on Zeb and Eddie's podcast.
Yes.
The Ez Project. And they're doing some cool things. And obviously we started having a conversation, started talking. I was like, it's so cool to meet like-minded people, especially on the Gold Coast, and hearing everything about what you're doing in the coaching space. And I was like, tell me more. I want to hear more about it. And hey, I'm grateful to be here today and we can do it all again.
Yeah, 100%. And what I love so much, so the majority of people that are listening to my podcast, they are mostly business owners. But what really captivated me about you, and I did not even know that you used to play football. I didn't know anything about you, but I kind of like that I didn't know so much about you, that it has really given me an opportunity to get to know you. But the majority of people listening, they're all business owners. And what really captivated me about you just was your presence, your energy. When I saw you walk into the space, you're like, I looked at you and I was like, this guy, he's making it very known that he's here. And it wasn't like, here I am. It was just a presence that you have about you. Did you know that?
I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I don't know. Well, you were obviously with a group of like friends. Which makes it, I guess, a lot easier.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I get a lot of energy from people. That's people say what gives you energy? Like the way I get energy is being around people. And so when I
could tell.
when I see like friendly faces, or even someone who they might be new to the group, or someone who knows someone, I don't know, you want to include them and you want to talk about them. You want to get to know them because, you know, people are doing so many cool things and there's just so many good people around.
Yeah.
So it's just like, once you start having these conversations, I don't know, it's this weird thing that it kind of just gives me energy, I think.
Yeah, I could tell. I have to tell you a funny story. So on Friday, I had Zabby from the Easy Project here.
Yeah, one of the great men. One of the great men.
And he said, Rebecca, when are you going to start interviewing people? Because we sort of pulled up the couch and, you know, my brother and I were sitting here and we were just having a chat. And I said, well, this Sunday, I said, I've got my first interview on Sunday. He goes, oh, who's coming on the show? And I told them you were coming on the show and they're like, oh, man. And we kind of had this moment. And I'm like, is this something I should know about right now? You're like, what
I don't know where we're going to go with this.
I said, no. I said, am I missing something? And they're like, he's the best, most genuine dude.
I love those guys.
That we have ever met. He was like, he was so fucking aggressive on the field and everyone was like, run like him, tackle like him, be like him, laugh like him, just like be authentic like him. We all just like strive to be like him.
I think I need to spend more time with those boys because they pump me up. They're pumping me up a bit too much than what it is. Yeah,
I could just tell they were just deep in thought, and I was thinking to myself, have I not really done my research here now? But they're like, no, they were deep in thought of just really admiring what an incredible human you are. So I just thought I would share that.
Well, thank you. That's very kind. That's very kind to hear.
So I would love for my audience to get to know you a little bit. Are you happy just to give us kind of a bit of a rundown of what your background is and where you're kind of at today? I would love to know a little bit more about you.
Yeah. The easiest thing to talk is about yourself, so I can make that very easy. But I'll summarize it. My background's rugby league. So I signed my first professional contract with the Brisbane Broncos at age 17. Like you said, I was in high school at the time, so for me, rugby league was always the dream, but you never really expect it to happen. My parents were big on academics, so going through a professional career, like did a Bachelor of Business, halfway through an MBA, like mum always pushed the academic side of it. And then I was grateful to obviously have like two incredible parents, super hardworking, just working class. Mum's a teacher, dad's a lift mechanic. And
awesome.
So they were all like super just blue collar, super hard workers.
And the siblings?
Older sister who's a teacher also, but we're all like a very close, like small tight knit family. Grew up here on the Gold Coast in Palm Beach. Like grew up surfing. Had the best childhood ever. But yeah, so my first contract at 17, and then when I signed that, I realized, okay, well this is what I want to be doing for the next 10 plus years. That's always the goal. Like the goal is to play for your country and play for your state. And was at the Brisbane Broncos for 3.5 years. In like their under 20s competition. So it's kind of like I was training full time with the NRL squad, but would play in like the competition below. And then had a bunch of injuries at the time. And then
hamstrings.
Yeah. I tore my hamstring 10 times. I think I must have been 19 or 20. And I was in the mindset of like, I just wanted to play NRL. Like I had one of my idols that I looked up to, a guy called Corey Parker, who, you know, captain the Broncos, Brisbane Broncos. He was a leader in the Queensland side. He's an Australian player. Like he was my idol growing up. I actually have a photo of me and him when we were 13 years old. I was 13 years old. Had this little rat's tails growth. There's a time in my life where I was just like, it's not what I want to be. Yeah. But anyway, he bought his first house at 18, made his NRL debut at 18. And I said, well, if I can be half the player he is, then, you know, I want to make my debut while I was a teenager, and I wanted to buy my first house when I was a teenager. Like, they were my two goals.
That's awesome. That's very young.
Yeah.
And to be that goal-driven from such a young age.
Well, it's like when you come into an NRL system, you're around obviously your idols, but guys who are mid-20s, 30s, mid-30s, right? And so you're just learning. It's just like it's a fast-track education. So you're learning from all the mistakes that they've already made, right? And like when it comes to, and you lean on crew, you lean on your role models and your idols, and I was just fortunate that the guys who I really looked up to, they were more than happy to share advice. So anyway, I put a lot of pressure on myself to get those two things done. I was lucky, I guess I ended up buying my first house at 20, which was pretty cool. But I had a bunch of injuries, those hamstrings, and I ended up moving back to the Gold Coast because there was a bit more opportunity. I feel like I needed to change up just out of the environment because it was a roller coaster. Like, I remember when I tore my hamstring the 5th time, I remember calling my dad and just like crying, obviously, and being like, I was like, mate, I'm done with footy. Like, I don't want to play anymore. Like, 'cause if it was an ACL or like I was out for like over 12 months with these hamstrings. It'd be fine if it was just like, okay, you're going to be out for the season. That's fine. But it was like, okay, you tear your hamstring, you do all the work, all the rehab, like you go through the blood, sweat and tears to try and get back, and then you would tear it again. And then you would go up, you do everything. Okay, let's go to the AIS, let's talk to the best specialist possible. You get on that high and then you tear it again. And it was just that constant roller coaster. And I was obviously young and didn't know any better and ended up calling my manager and told him what I wanted to do, how I wanted to like take some time, maybe a year off. He's like, Keeks, you're 19 years old. Like take all the pressure off yourself. Like guys aren't making their NRL debut until their early mid-20s. So sometimes late 20s. So like take all the pressure off and then end up moving back to the Gold Coast. I was around friends and family again. I was enjoying my footy. And then I ended up getting to make my NRL debut at 20, which was like obviously dream come true. Anyway, long story short, played NRL for a couple of years, had a bunch of concussions, which ended up medically retiring me at age 24, like you mentioned. But yeah, that's kind of like a little
That's amazing,
background,
I kind of want to dive deeper. So when I believe you had your first run, was it the final game of the season?
Yeah, great. Yeah, you did your research.
There we go.
Yeah.
I am really curious. What did it feel like running out on the field when you have been working for something for so long and then the moment is finally there? Take me through that moment.
It's a dream. Like it's a cliche, but it actually is a dream. Like you work so hard. And I think every kid wants to play in the NRL. Like even when you're 11, 12 years old, you look up to these idols and you're like, that's what I want to do. And then you work so hard. And then when you finally get there, you're like, oh, it was mad. I remember being in Sydney, all my friends and family flew up for the game. And it was the last game of the season. We weren't going to play finals. We're already knocked out. But just to be there, it's a special time.
For sure.
And I was only supposed to play like 5 or 10 minutes because you're a rookie, you only play like a little bit. But we just had so many injuries. I ended up playing like 60 out of the 80 minutes.
Wow.
And so for my first game, and you mentioned like I was an aggressive style of like player. And I remember just loving it. Like I just love the atmosphere. I love like people screaming. I love running out. I love like coming back and seeing my family after the game. It was actually funny the way I found out about making my debut because usually they make a fuss of it. You're in the team room the week before and then the coach might do a little spiel and they say, I'm making his debut this week is such and such. But because it was so late in the season, to be honest, I didn't think I was playing that season. I was playing the like tier below, like reserve grade, I guess they call it. And we just finished up the season the week prior because that reserve grade finished a week prior. And so we were all out like Mad Mondays, our party scene. Like
yes, totally.
We had this huge piss up on, I think, the Sunday, but we still had to come in for training on the Monday because we would train against the main squad. I remember we had a huge night. I think I came in at like 2 or 3 in the morning, went straight to training with a few of the other guys who were also on the same reserve grade team as me. And our coach at the time, I walked in with my sunnies on. He's like, Keys, come on, I want to have a chat to you. And I was like, oh, am I in trouble from last night? What did I do? I was like, I feel like I was pretty sweet. And he's just like, mate, he's like, congratulations, you're going to make your NRL debut this week. And I'm so hungover.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I remember taking my sunnies off and I was like, okay, well, looks like I better sober up and get ready for this. But then after that, I dialed in and because it's important, like it's important.
Of course.
It was, but it was a special time.
That is amazing. So when you navigated all of those injuries, so I'm really big on, it's really easy to show up when things are great, when things are flowing, when, we don't have 2-minute challenges. It's really easy to celebrate and kind of just keep on your goal and moving in that direction. But when we up against moments of challenge, whether that's injury or any kind of roadblock that we had ahead of us, what was that kind of internal dialogue and how did you actually move through that?
It's a great question. There's a few things. Like it's easy to kick stones, right? We've all done it. We all get in situations where why me, like totally. fall victim to it, and it's just like, why is this happening to me? And of course, like I had those thoughts when I tore my hamstrings. It was a classic victim mentality, but it was just because I didn't know. I hadn't had the evidence to show that I could push through it. So a big thing that I think I sort of learned from that experience, and even taking into all the concussion stuff that I had, like you said, I was medically retired at 24. I actually had 12 months out with concussion 2 years prior to that. But for me, it was always like, what's next? I can't change what's happened. Like, I can't change the fact that I've had all these concussions. Even when I got medically retired, it was a conversation I had with the neurologist, because when you have all these concussions, you got to go through neurological testing, and it's a whole ordeal. You get scans and the whole thing. I remember being on the call to the neurologist. I said, Keegs, I recommend you medically retire, and I had a good relationship with him because I'd done the 12 months a couple of years earlier. And so for me, it would have been like easy to kick stones, like go down the drinking and do all that.
Sure, yeah.
But I'm like, that's not going to help me. That's not going to help me. I was like, the way I looked at it was like, what's next? I can't change the last 10, 15 years of head knocks and injuries and everything, but what can I do now? And so for me, I was like, all right, well, I want to be good when I'm 40 and 50 and 60. I want to be able to articulate my sentences. I want to be able to, have a good family. I want to have kids one day, and I want to do, like, I love business. I love the idea of building brand, and I want to be able to help people. Like that's a core value of mine. It's like, how do we make genuine impact in community and people? And obviously mental health is the forefront for me for that, and something that I'm really interested in. So I was like, well, I can't change that. So what's next? And so what did it look like? It looked like, what's things that I'm really passionate about? And it's mental health, psychology. It's being able to help friends and family first, but then also mates who are coming out of professional sport. And so that's how I got involved with, Thorough PA and the medical, the Pass, Play and Transition program. And so for me, it's all about what's next.
Yeah.
And looking forward to that.
That's incredible. Do you think, has mentorship played a big part in that journey for you? Did you have any mentors that were there to support you along the way, or have you kind of built this like internal strength and resilience just from experience? Or
I think you see it. Like you definitely see other people go through it. But yeah, mentors are huge. Mentors are the biggest thing ever. Like you stand on the shoulders of giants, like stand on the shoulders of people who have been there before. And so when you see these like guys and girls who have been through the struggles, like talk to them. I'm such a big believer in like talking to people about your own struggles, your own vulnerabilities, because they'll be able to help you, or they might refer to other lived experience that they've gone through. And so you'll just learn, like you'll just learn naturally. But yeah, to answer your question, I had some great mentors, whether that being in coaches, whether that being in business mentors that I'd reach out to randomly, or it might be just friends and family, guys who've been in the same, like also guys where I want to be. Like I'll talk to people who are in their 50s and 60s. And what I love about those guys, especially who are really successful, kind of like where I want to be at that age, I talk to them, and the common trait that I see from them is that they're also curious. Like they're all so curious. And I'm like, man, you've got like millions like of dollars. Like you don't need to work. Like, why do you keep doing that? Like, we do it because we love it. Like I do it because I love it. It's just like, why would I stop now? Like I've still got a decade, 2 decades of learning. Like imagine how much stuff I can get done in that time. Like why would I stop doing that? So the curiosity thing I think is huge.
I am so passionate about this. I always say, I wonder, like I know we both, we have this one life, and I just want to see how much I can accomplish in this one life we know that we have. How many people can I impact? How much can I experience? How much love can I experience? How much joy can I experience? How many people can I impact? How much can I feel? Like what can my experience be in this one life we have?
Do you think you've always had that though, or do you reckon that's been learnt over time?
I think I've always had that outlook, simply because I've come from very humble beginnings, from a small country town, and growing up, I always say I grew up on the foundation of love, but, that was, financially and other aspects, we weren't very abundant. So I think when your baseline is like love, but that's it, you're not going to fall so far. So I was kind of never really afraid to push boundaries, to see, moving out here at, 18, 19 on my own, like, could barely speak English at the time,
You're doing very well to come now. You're hosting a podcast.
Okay, well, there we go. Yeah, I've still got an accent.
You're
I'm
doing
working
good.
on
You're
it.
doing very well.
No, but I think I've just always I've just had the faith that I'm always going to land on my feet. Like, what is it really to lose? And I'd rather have a crack on doing something. But I think just coming back to that curiosity, what if, like, I wonder what would happen if we just tried. I wonder what would happen if I just went for that thing or tried, like, it's just, I wonder what would happen if you just start to navigate life from that lens of curiosity and also being really optimistic. Like, I often speak about like assumptions, like if we are leading ourselves with the assumption that I'm not interested or people don't want to hear me speak or, you know, there are no opportunities for me, that's probably going to be my reality.
Yeah.
But if I keep feeding the assumption that I'm making great impact, people value what we have to say and, you know, things that we want to do, like I choose for that to be my assumption.
Yeah.
Do you resonate with that?
100%. But I look at you and you're putting that out into the world. Like I get the vibe from you that you're constantly thinking big and you're constantly like you said, the assumptions, like you're not limited by your environment at all. You're constantly like, how can we push that? And for me, I think that's learned because like we're a product of our environment, right? Like if you can't see something, you probably don't realize it's a possibility. Like for me, I had, you know, a lot of friends playing in the NRL, so I knew that was a real possibility for me. And when you're around those types of people, it's like surrounding yourself with the type of people that you want to be. It's like when you're around those people, the possibilities are endless. You know, when I finished up football, I was working for a disability support service in Whatability, and they're an incredible organisation. They make real genuine impact in the community, especially with people who are living with a disability. And what they do is they employ a lot of part-time and full-time athletes as support workers because they're the best support workers of all. You know, they're young, they're fun, they're fit.
Yeah.
And they take participants out into the community, and it's great. And so I got involved with them and managed their athlete program, and we built it from Sydney to Australia-wide. Like we were just in Sydney, and then we launched Gold Coast and Brisbane and Melbourne and Perth. And it was cool to see that grow. And the biggest learning I learned from that was just like, there's no limits. Like there's no limits. It's like, even now with the podcast space, like we're doing some incredible stuff with some global brands, right? And we're going over to the States to see like the Whoop team over there in Boston. And we're talking about doing some stuff with like, I don't know if I can say it yet because it's not happening. We haven't locked it in, but like some incredible sporting codes over there.
Awesome.
And it's like, the podcast isn't even 10 months old. Like
Amazing.
we're not even a year old. No, thank you. And like, it's just like, there's honestly no limit. Like what's stopping us from just like bouncing around the world, like just having incredible conversations and what you said, making impact, which I think is the most important thing out of it all.
Most important thing, one of my highest values, 100%. I sense that, well, you must be because you're a professional athlete. You must be quite competitive. Do you feel like that has also translated into other areas of your life too? Is there any part of like, you know, you kicking goals in other areas of your life? Is that competitive side of you coming out still?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think so. Maybe. I'm not too sure. I know when I was playing footy, super competitive. Like probably on the extreme end of like being competitive. Like you talk to Eddie and Zeb and probably anyone I played with or against, like the person that I was on the field and the person that I am off the field is like two totally different people.
Yeah, I figure that.
Probably like played a very aggressive style of footy, and I did that because I was competitive. And from a kid, I was told like that's your way into the NRL. It's like you hold on to that aggressive nature, like that's one of your strengths. But then when I take that into the outside world, I was like, that's not me. Like that's not like
it's not like an alter ego that sort of just came over you.
So
when you stepped onto the
it's like you
field.
put a mask on when you go onto the footy field. It's like you're going into war. Like it's wild. But now I think there is like a little bit of competitiveness in me. I think most people who want to do good probably have that bit of competitiveness.
Well, I think so, yeah.
But I don't know, like I don't look at it as like a bad thing. I look at it as like
I agree.
I look at it as like how many people can we like make genuine impact with?
Yeah.
And then so for me the competitiveness is like, well, how can we grow? Like how can we reach more people?
Correct. It's not necessarily being better than anyone.
No.
You know, so it's a different, but I've always I'm very competitive too.
Yes.
You know, growing up playing sport, all the things, and I always just wanted to win.
Did you have many brothers and sisters?
Just the one brother.
Just the one brother.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, brother.
So, but we're very close in age. So, like, I'm that second child, and I'm like, I'm not taking, you know, I don't want to be second. I want to be first.
Yes.
So, like, I think that's just in my nature of just, and I think, you know, I had, or my dad, he, you know, both of my parents, they were huge supporters of mine. But my dad, he had this belief that you're the best. You're the best, you're the best, you're the best, you're the best. So I think that almost like instilled What does it look like for me when I'm not achieving? What does it look like for me when I'm not winning? But for a long time, I actually held on to my competitive side as being something negative. Now I'm like, it's probably one of the greatest things that have actually got me like this far, and not because I'm competing versus anyone else. It's like, I just want to see how good it gets to be. It's like this desire of like growth, of just wanting to grow and evolve.
Do you think it's like you're competing with the person you were yesterday to be better?
Yeah.
I think that could be it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the beautiful part is that it gets to come from a place of overflow. So I often check in to go, are we working because it's like an away from driver? So like we're not in a situation where we don't want to be in, or is it like a towards driver? So all of my drivers in terms of like my goals and the impact or people I connect with, they are towards drivers of like towards of making an impact, towards of like growing and, you know, this whole evolution of like becoming, right? So they never come from a place of lack. They always come from a place of overflow, if that makes sense.
And I imagine they're probably very in tune with like your own values. Like you talked about growth, like I'm sure that's one, and impact and helping people. It sounds like what you're doing now is very aligned with your own values. Is that something you think about?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
So I always say, even the way I'm running my business, I make sure that it's alignment with my values, and I make decisions based on my values. I run my business in alignment with my values. That I don't think that we have to choose. And we had a conversation like off air before that, you know, there is no place we'd rather be than here on a Sunday having this chat.
We're doing a toughie. We've got a beautiful little coffee and just and settling in a beautiful space.
Yeah.
But how did you pick? Like, did you pick your values, or do you think that comes from your family, your friends, your environment?
A lot of my values, most of them actually stem from a void.
Okay.
So even like, so wealth is one of my values.
Yeah.
If that is like wealth for time or actual money. And so wealth is one of my values, but that really stemmed from me not having money growing up and me knowing exactly what it's like to struggle or never have enough and having to worry in this like sick feeling in your stomach of never having enough. So now I really value the freedom of having enough and what that feels like.
Yeah.
You know, even impact is also one of my values. That stemmed from feeling like I was a little girl from a small country town that only had one little voice and I had no impact. Now I'm like, actually, no, I do value impact. So I think a lot of them have actually stemmed from being filled by a void.
Yeah.
What about you?
I love everything about what you just said, just quietly. Like, I know it sounds like you've done a lot of work on that. It sounds like I'm sure you probably wrote them down. Because you can speak to it. Like you can speak so openly to it. Like two of my core values is connection and kindness.
Yeah.
And I get that from my family.
Yeah,
Like my mum and dad, like they are two of the most generous, like nicest people you'll ever meet. And my dad, like super hardworking guy growing up, like, but then also like would do anything for anyone.
Yes.
Like if it was a Sunday morning, he said, Bill, his name's Bill, he's like, man, I need to borrow your trailer. We've got to lug some brick around. We've got to knock over this thing. He's just like done. Like and I think those two definitely passed down.
Yeah.
And like my mum, she was a teacher at a high school. And so she taught a lot of my friends growing up. And every time I would go to her school for pickup or whatever, they would be like, oh, like if they didn't know you, you'd be like, oh, you're Mrs. Hipgrave's son. It's like, your mum is the best. Like, she's the kindest person ever. She would do anything. And she's just like, your mum is so positive. Like, she's just like, would never say a bad thing about everyone. And so it's like, those two are probably the biggest ones because I saw it. I saw it happen in real life.
Incredible role
Then
models.
also like the hard work piece. I saw mum and dad work super hard as well. And I took that probably into like professional sport and what I do now. And so that, there's three of them. And it's just like, you can see it. And when you see 100%. It, and that's what like, I remember,
it's oozing through you.
Well, it's just like, I remember thinking about, we've done like value work. You do it all the time in footy.
Yeah.
But then when I came out of footy, I was like, I really want to dial in to see like, what are my four values or 3 or 4 values? And I think I Googled like values and there was like hundreds of different words. And I just like went through and I just highlighted the ones that I think resonated and then just like slowly refined, like reflecting, started thinking about it. And then I landed on those three are probably the big ones, like connection, kindness, and hardworking.
Yeah, beautiful.
And also like the ability to make impact. I think I love that.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So you're studying psychology now,
Yep.
and you have a thriving podcast, and I feel like you're very involved in communities and stuff. Something I've heard you say, or a couple of things, but I'm going to start here. You speak about what you do now, you see yourself doing for like the next 10 years. I find that very fascinating how you are so anchored into like a long-term vision. Talk me through that, because the reason why I'm asking is because I see a lot of people that want to see kind of results tomorrow, or they think next month, they think next year. And I have this rule that I get to be so clear on the what, but I completely detach from the timeline.
Yeah.
So hearing you say that I see myself doing this for like the next 10 years, and I'm happy to fuck up, and I'm happy to like make mistakes, and I'm just going to keep on moving. I found that so refreshing. So I just want to get your perspective on that.
Oh, I love this. And even that conversation around people wanting things now. I don't know what it is about, but it's one of the things that just, I don't get angry about too many things, but it's just frustrating because like you got to do the work to get where you want to do.
Yeah.
Playing rugby league, it's a hard thing. Like only 1% of the crew like go on and make it into the NRL. So there was always a chance, or there was always that conversation, especially from mum and dad around, well, if you don't make it, what are you going to do? Like, what's your plan B? And so I think that's why they loved for me to do the academic side. And so I did all that. But even when I was in there, I understood from a very early age that this isn't what I'm going to be doing forever. If you have an incredible career, you're probably going to get to 30, 35. And that's like not even a fifth of your working career. Sure. Yeah. So I was just like, I was constantly curious. I was like, all right, well, what I want to be doing. So when I was in rugby league, I tried a bunch of different things just to figure out what I wanted to do.
Love that.
So like on days off, I would go and work in fine dining restaurants like Alex Labart, was at the Valley Eyewear opening the other day, which was great to see him. But I went in on my days off and would just like prep in his kitchen. Like, and it was,
I love that.
Didn't even know him. I remember just like hitting him up and be like, man, I love like eating at your restaurant. I was like, I might want to own a restaurant one day.
Yes.
I love cooking. Like this is something that I really love. It's like, do you mind if I just come in? It was incredible. And then I would like work in cafes, and I worked as a mortgage broker for a little bit, and I was landscaping, and I was laboring, and I was in cranes, and I just tried everything. And like, don't get me wrong, very fortunate that when you're in the rugby league community, people are more love for you to come in and just see and so for me, like when I finished footy, when I got medically retired, like my career got like ended prematurely. I knew everything that I didn't want to do. Right. Yes. And there were certain things that you might glorify a career, and like, this is what I want to own a cafe one day. But then you're in a cafe and you're like, oh, actually, I don't want to do this. Because you live it. You're in there and you live it.
Yeah.
And so I came out, and I think afterwards I knew a big thing that I wanted to do was helping people. Like that was at a core. And then going back to like my values and what I wanted to do, I was like, well, I want to have the tools to be able to help my friends and family, but also guys who are coming out and girls who are coming out of professional sport. And I was always intrigued in mental health. Like I lost one of my best mates to suicide when we were 17, was involved. And then from that stay, and that was a pretty tough thing in itself. But it was just like, from that moment, it was always like, okay, well, we're going into like this huge like alpha environment in rugby league, and you roll in and guys and people aren't talking about what's going on. And for me, when I came into the NRL, I was just like, well, I want to be that guy that mates can talk to.
Yes.
And so I got involved with Movember, been an ambassador for Movember for the last 8 years. And so it was always a subconscious thing where I wanted to help and be that guy that mates can talk to. And then when I came out of the NRL, I started working for the Disability Support Service, and I was thinking like, oh, what do I want to be doing? Like, what do I want to do for the next 10 plus years, like you said? And then it was like, okay, well, mental health has been such a huge part of it. I want to help friends, family. What does that look like practically? I was like, okay, well, I have to have the tools. Like I don't want to just be some random guy on Instagram who, and don't get me wrong, there's a place for lived experience, but I want to know the right things. I want to have the evidence. I want to have the legitimacy. So that's why I'm back at university studying psychology. That's the education piece. And then I was like, okay, well, how do we amplify these messages, and how do we get people who, we all look up to? So for me, growing up, athletes were they even like now they're so influential in the community.
Yeah, definitely.
And everything that they wanted, everything that they were doing, that's what I wanted to be doing. Making my NRL debut, buying my first house, that was all because guys that I looked up to were doing that. So I was like, well, these guys can be talking about their own struggles, their own vulnerabilities, then it makes it okay for us. And it validates our experiences of what we're going through. So that's how the podcast came around.
That's huge.
And it was like, because I'm an hour about doing a podcast, and there's probably a little bit of imposter syndrome. I don't know how to host. I don't know how to do media and editing and social media. But then I think someone said, like, you have so many incredible friends. They're playing their best level of sport that they can. And that's just not in NRL. That's in AFL and netball and Super Rugby and the Olympics. They're like, it would be selfish of you to not have these conversations with the crew.
Yes.
And I was like, far out. That's so true. So I'm super fortunate to have these conversations pretty much just with mates.
Yeah,
and that's a way of
incredible.
amplifying that conversation. And that's probably where most of my passion lies. And then also the lived experience piece. That's with the RLPA and helping past players in the NRL transition out of the game.
Yeah.
So while it's busy and while it's there's a lot on my plate and all three things, like the psychology, the podcast, and then my full-time job, they're all connected.
They're all connected, yes.
And then you think, if you want to be a master, if you want to have like a really great inside knowledge into certain things, you got to be doing things for like 10 plus years.
Yes.
You have to put in the work. And I realized that I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just a former NRL player. Like I have no idea what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So these conversations are a way of learning.
For sure.
On the podcast, I'm not preaching anything. I go in saying, I don't know, I don't have the answers. But what I'm trying to do is come on a journey with me to learn.
Yes, totally.
And let's learn from these guys and girls.
Huge.
So yeah.
That's an incredible perspective, because I think it's so refreshing. And I think it's an important perspective to go, do we have that long-term vision? Because I see a lot of people, they self-sabotage simply because they want this instant gratification like next month. Why am I not seeing results next month? And I'm like, and they're like, oh, you had this overnight success. And I was like, yeah, I've had my business for the past 8 years.
Yeah.
And, all of the unseen hours, who we are being when no one's watching.
Yeah.
And they're like, how do you know so much? I was like, well, I still see myself as a student. I don't know a lot, but I choose to, for every hour I coach, I study 2 hours.
Yeah.
So like I constantly invest in my own learning and, getting better and like having that long-term vision. I think it's essential. And the byproduct of that is the results, is the impact.
It's funny what you said, like the overnight success comes from the last 8 years of work, and people only see the success at the end of the day. But it's like, no, I've been working. Like, just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not happening. And that's when you become really confident. And that's when you can obviously do solo podcasts, which I was very impressed with when we were talking at Valley Eyewear. I remember you saying, so you do a solo podcast? I'm like, how do you talk for so long? I can talk underwater. But I was like, that's so impressive. But that's because you've done all the work.
Yeah.
Like you've put in like 8+ years of this stuff. And so you're on the stage now where like people are listening to you because you've got incredible insight. Yeah.
Yeah. But even also like, adding voices of impact to, to my podcast now. I think it's incredible that I let, my audience experience like this magic, this conversation, because I think that what you entertain, the conversations you entertain, like that is the byproduct of your thinking and how you show up in the world and how you navigate certain things. So yeah, I think it's really cool to see your perspective. I'm kind of going to take a bit of a turn now. Okay, awesome.
Do what you need to do. Yeah, I'm happy with that.
So you now help other athletes like transition out of the NRL. Can you just talk to me a little bit about that transition phase? Because I think a lot of people, whether we are pivoting in our businesses, where we're going from like being a stay-at-home mom to, stepping into a business, whether you are changing careers or, if you have sudden changes and you are needing to change, what would you say maybe number one, the biggest kind of challenges you see when people have to face transition full stop?
Yeah.
And second to that, how do we navigate that in a really kind of effortless way?
Two great questions. I think the biggest piece that and I can only speak through lived experience and the conversations that I've had along the way. And just to preface, I've only been in the role since the end of last year.
Awesome.
And so for me, it's not so much about giving advice. It's probably more of a referral piece. So when I catch up with a player, it's like, how can we help? Like, is it career coaching? Is it having access to psychologists? Is it if they got medically retired, navigating through that process? Is it employment network? So for me, I'm just referring to where I think's best. And yes, I can talk on my own lived experience. That's fine. But the biggest, stepping back and zooming out, the biggest challenge that I see in players, and even apply this to any occupation, is the identity piece.
Huge.
And attaching yourself to that identity piece. And
I think we spoke about that on the night.
I think I think we did.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay,
Huge.
well, I'm Keegan Hipgrave, the NRL player, and you know, and I've been at fault with it. I talk to a lot, and you can see it. It's just like that's all you are. And then as soon as you step out of the box, it's like you're so quick to be dragged back into it. It might be internally, it might be externally. And so when you've been in a system, especially an NRL system, since you were 17, 18-year-old kid, you know, you've been told what to do. You've got your routine. You've had everything done for you. Like you got your flights covered. You get your strapping done. You get your meals prepped. You get everything sort of done for you.
Yeah.
And so when you come out of that piece, it's like who am I? Like what am I supposed to be doing? Like where do my values sit? And I think I was lucky in the sense that I was constantly looking for other things. And while I liked rugby league, it wasn't my only thing. Like I loved surfing, and I loved, you know, knocking around with business crew. And like I said, I was talking to a bunch of different people. So rugby league wasn't like my thing.
I think it's huge. This is huge.
I agree. I think it's a huge part. And when guys and now girls, because the female space is growing incredibly, it's like when they come out of it, they're just, what am I going to do? And so my advice to navigating out is like try different things. Like try and see what you like. Like see where, and then if it aligns with your values, even better. And don't get me wrong, there's going to be a time where you have a family and you've got to put food on the table, and you might have to go out to the mines, and you might have to work that shit job for a little bit.
Sure.
But if you've got something in the background ticking along, it's like, okay, well, what generally lights me up? Like I think before the podcast we were talking about like what gives you energy. Like when I talk to guys and girls, it's like when you see them light up, when they sit in their chair a little bit more,
totally.
and their voice heightens and they have energy and passion, I was like, you're in a flow. You're in a flow. And that's when you know that you're aligned with your values, and you know when you found your purpose and you found like what you actually want to do. Like when you see in the podcast, like I could talk about the podcast all day because I love it. Like I could spend endless amount of time on it. So when I talked to crew, I said, figure out what you want to do. But then also it's like you take the horse to water, but you can't force the horse to drink. Like you got to be when they're ready.
100%. But I even think that process should almost like start before people transition.
For sure.
It's like, you know, that should almost like years before. But what I love, it's like the permission slip in allowing yourself to be more than one thing. It's huge. Like I just don't have to be Rebecca the business coach. Like I'm like, I have so many things about me, and I'm like, I don't want to be just that person that just talks about business and like, am I passionate about that? 100%. Like I love having conversations around business and money and mindset and like, but I'm like, there is so much more to me as well. And I think for a long time, I didn't really give myself the permission to be like more than the labels I've placed on myself. But I've realized that that's just, no one really did that. It's something that we do for ourselves, right?
How do you think you broke that mold? Because you said that you had, you know, the internal pressures of like Rebecca the businesswoman, you know, like how did you step out of that? Was it an internal thing? Did you talk to people? Like how did you navigate it?
For me, it was a decision, and a decision of being okay not to be for everybody.
Oh, I love that. That's so cool.
Yeah. That's for me. I have a bit of I used to, one of my biggest fears was not being liked and, you know, feeling accepted. And I felt like I had to place myself and, you know, label myself as certain things and, you know, being a good girl and, you know, being good at this and being good at that. And then I'm worthy of, you know, being loved and, you know, all of those things. And like, I've done a lot of work when it comes to this stuff. But I realized that that was something that I had to break free from. And for me, it was just to give myself the permission to be like all of those things and to go even deeper. I was told once, so I used to work in real estate when I lived in Sydney. I got sent home from work once because I showed my shoulders. And they said that I wasn't professional because they could see my shoulders. I had a beautiful corporate dress on. There was like
the kid
nothing.
was looking
there
good.
Was like,
the kid was good.
It was fine.
Yeah.
But they're like, you can't show your shoulders. People are not going to take you seriously. So for years, I had the assumption that if I ever show my shoulders and I want other people to give me any form of respect, I can't show my shoulders.
Wow.
So when you look back, or I probably deleted all of it now, trauma. When you go scroll deep down my Instagram, you'll see like on all of my, like if I showed up online, I always cover my shoulders. And I'm like, this is actually crazy that I don't. And even showing up on meetings and stuff, like I would never wear a singlet to a meeting, to an interview, being on camera, you'll never see my shoulders. And then one day I decided to share it with, I had this group and there was probably like 20 girls on the call, and I shared that with them. And I rocked up in a singlet the following call. I'm like, this is my moment. I'm like, I popped a shoulder. And I think it was just like all of these labels that I had placed on myself. And I just simply decided to break free from that. Another part of me, like I'm a bit of a show pony. Like I love dancing. I love expressing myself in different ways. And I'm like, will people take me seriously if I am the show pony whilst talking business? But I know that these are all, beliefs and assumptions that often we create, right?
Yeah.
And for me, it was simply a decision to break free from that.
I think this part is probably my favorite part of this conversation because it hits. Like I fully understand where you're going. Very similar, right? Especially in that environment of sport. It's just, as soon as you step out of that little bubble of sport, you're so quick to being brought back in.
Yeah.
Like, and you can ask anyone, like if you had a haircut, boy, it's like, oh, like fresh fade, like who you trying to impress? And you're like, oh my God. Like, and you kind of limit like the type of person you are. And you said something that was really interesting when I think you gave yourself permission to like not be liked by everyone.
Yeah.
And as soon as you gave you, because I was similar, as soon as I gave myself the permission, like not everyone's going to like me and I'm just going to be myself, I don't know, I found that like more people started gravitating towards me because you're being genuine and you're being authentic.
It's
like
so
you've spoken about this before, where it's just like when you're living your true self, like when you're fully authentic in what you're doing, it's like that radiates,
It
and it
does.
draws like-minded people together.
That's what I saw in you, like on the night, because it was just like an ownership of who you are. And when I've sort of landed in that myself, of just allowing myself to be me and the fullest expression of who I am, and stepping into that ownership of all of the things that I want to do, all of the things that I want to become, but all that I am today, and like fully owning that.
Yeah.
And I think that comes with a level of vulnerability.
Yeah.
Because I have had a number of clients even, and a roundabout way, often, not with everyone, but the story often goes, I watched you for so long, you triggered the fuck out of me because I saw this, and they will go down that, whatever they've seen in me. And I've made you the problem instead of it being, my own stuff I had to work through. So I made you wrong, talked shit about you, unfolded you, or like whatever that was, until I've decided to lean in and become closer to you because they've seen something that they want or whatever.
Yeah.
And that I had a number of clients that have come into my world from beginning not liking me.
Yeah.
And that has actually been really healing for me because I have learned to actually see beyond their projections and connect with that to go, well, that's their journey and their responsibility for the beliefs and assumptions they have about me.
Yeah, you can't impact what other people are thinking about you. Like you can't change their opinion, and who cares?
And who cares?
Who cares? And I'm sure that now you're living like your true authentic self. You're probably so much happier anyway.
I am so much happier, and even the people that you attract from that.
Yeah.
Like when you live in alignment with your values, when you show up as the fullest, most authentic expression of who you are going to attract people that fucking love you for being that person.
Yeah.
And I think this is why we will never burn out, because there is no like front that we have to put on. It's like, this is who I am. This is like how I like to express myself. This is how I like to show up in the world. That there is no like, oh, now I need to step in. And of course, like, we sit here semi-professional having this conversation.
You might be a professional. I'm definitely not.
No, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like we sit here and have this conversation now, but it's freeing.
Yeah.
I feel this huge sense of like freedom. And I think that's really what I saw in you. It's like an ownership of who you are.
Do you think you won't see the burnout piece, or the burnout piece is delayed for you because like you're doing what you genuinely love?
Let's go down the path of like talking about balance, for instance. Yeah. And I would love, even before I share my aspect on balance. How do you navigate all of the things that you got to navigate at the moment? Because I think like a really hot topic is like you got to strive for balance or you'll burn out.
I think about this all the time.
Yeah.
This is like the topic that I think most about because it's at the forefront because I have friends and family saying, Keith, you're doing too much. Or like, how do you do, like, why do you do so much? How are you doing it? You're going to burn out. You're going to be tired. Like, it's not sustainable. Like even I think my sister said something just like, if you keep going at the pace you're going, you'll kill yourself. And I'm like, I don't know if I believe that. Like, I genuinely don't. Like, I talk to mates who are in a job that they're doing and they work in big hours. Like they're working 12, 14-hour days. They've got families. They want to hang out with their kids and they don't like their job. And you can see that they're tired.
Yeah, they're tired.
They're tired. And then I was like, nah, I get so much energy from my podcast. Don't get me wrong. I do get tired. Like working like this week's been a busy week. Like we're in mid-semester exams at the moment. It's just a time where you just have to go hard. And it's very dry content. It's data and statistics. And it's just very dry and it's late nights and it's early mornings.
Yeah.
But I know that that's going to help me so much. It's going to help me down the track because I want to be able to read these studies and I want to make sure that these studies are legitimate. They're not false. They're not fabricated. And so I'm putting in the work now to help me go down the track. Podcasts, I could spend endless amount of time. I got 1,000 emails that are just sitting there. And I'm like, I actually can't wait to get them because these are really cool brands that I want to align myself with, that align with my brand and the Keegan and Company, the podcast brand. And so I was like, I don't think I get that. And I think I was talking to a friend, dear friend, he lives just up the road. He has a beautiful troop carrier as well. And he's like, usually when you think you're at capacity, you're only really at 70 or 80%.
Yes.
So if you can be super efficient in what you do, whether that's like blocking time out or having a day where you can just like chill and think, like there are certain tools that you can do to give yourself for longevity.
I think, well, a lot of people say very similar things to me. They're like, you got to slow down and like, why, like you're already successful. Like, why you keep pushing? Like, what are you pushing for? And I'm like, you don't get it. Yeah. And I'm like, well, because it's just like it's just in our DNA.
Yeah.
The way we are living and breathing and showing up in the world and making impact. I feel like I'll do that until the day I die. Because it's just, I love it. And then the conversation may evolve and grow and go in different direction, but that's just like evolution of life, right? But my perspective on balance for me is not like having everything balanced. For me, balance is an internal state of being okay with my own priorities. And I think when that really landed for me to go, am I okay with the priorities I make in my life? For as long as I'm okay with that, I'm in balance. Yeah. If I'm not okay with that, then I got to tweak things. But I'll go through seasons where I may not prioritizing like catching up with friends every day. I may not prioritize like going to the gym every day because I have like a season of, I gotta focus on this project at work or like whatever that might be. For as long as I'm okay with that, I feel like I'm in balance.
Sounds like you're happy with saying no to certain things.
Yeah, huge on boundaries. Yeah. And I think and not everyone's going to like that if they don't have strong boundaries. But I think people that are just like okay with being firm in what you value and the season that you're in, I simply don't think that we are going to burn out.
Saying no to people and for them to be like, oh, well, why wouldn't you do that? It's such an easy thing. It's like, no, I've got to set these boundaries. I learned this from a guy called Matt Sharma. He's an incredible buyer's agent here on the Gold Coast.
Oh, yes.
He's at the Gold Coast Times.
Yes,
you might, he's he does some incredible things. But I talk to him about this all the time because he's on the journey of growth and he's built an incredible business from scratch. And he's just like, I set my mornings during the week is just for me. Like I'll wake up in the morning, I'll have my morning swim, I'll train, I'll make my smoothie, and that's my time. That's my time to think creatively, to get my best work done. He's like, I'm not scheduling any catch-ups in the mornings. That's just my time. And I've messaged him saying, mate, come over for a sauna. Like, let's do a swim. Let's do a training. He's just like, I can't, man.
That's his time.
That's my time. Like, if we want to do a weekend, like if we want to train on the weekend, we can do that. Afternoon's fine, but my mornings are my time.
Yeah. And I also, are you also off the booze? You're not drinking at the moment?
I'm doing a year.
You're doing a year?
Doing a year, yeah.
Okay, amazing.
10 months in, couple months to go.
Okay, how is that going for you?
The best.
The best?
The best. Do you drink?
No, I think I stopped drinking about a year and a half ago.
How are you feeling?
Fucking amazing.
So good, right? My God, it's so good.
Yes.
Why did you stop?
I was never a big drinker. Like, no, like I've had my nights, but I was never like a huge drinker. But for me, I sort of just became like addicted to like seeing how good I can feel and how good things can get.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if I feel this sharp when I'm drinking, imagine what I would feel like if I'm not drinking.
Oh my God. Isn't that the truth though?
And like waking up with, I feel like my patience, my mental clarity, like everything, like even like going out, not drinking, like I enjoy it more. Like I feel like I get to experience life through a different lens.
So you weren't drinking at the Valley Eyewear party?
No.
See, and you would have no idea.
No.
Because you have like, and I think there's certain types of people who can just go out and not drink. And I think you become more comfortable like that.
Yeah.
Like I would catch up with you and the crew and you'd have no idea.
No.
You know, you might have a drink in your hand, like it might be a soda and lime or a Coke or whatever, but no one would have any idea because you're so personable. Like you can have those conversations.
Yeah.
And I've spoken to a lot of crew who are sober curious. They're like, I don't know how you do it. Like you just go out, you might be out till 12, 1, 2 in the morning, but you're fine. I was like, mate, if I'm tired, I might have a little Red Bull. But other than that, I'm flying.
Well, that's it. You're flying, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, well, I just love, and I think it's so refreshing to hear it because I found more and more people, they're kind of stepping away from drinking and maybe because we're on the Gold Coast, I feel like it's a little bit like people are a little bit more healthy. But what has that been like for you, like being surrounded by people drinking? And because what I realized when I stopped, that I had quite a few friendships that were built on the foundation of drinking.
Really?
Yeah. So it's like we would get together and like we would have wine and that's like how we caught up.
Yeah.
So what do we kind of do when I don't have a wine in my hand,
Change
right?
activities.
Well, that's it. Well, 100%. But I think a lot of people, it brings up a lot in other people who are not ready to kind of take that step.
I think a lot of people will project on what they think should be doing onto you. It's like, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And but what I've found is, especially over the last year, is like people who I think probably like not respect you a little bit more, but they're just like, there's no way that I could go out till 2 in the morning. Like I stopped drinking in September, October last year. The first month of not drinking, I had 3 weddings and 2 bucks parties. And like October, it's wedding season, you know what I mean? And these are big weddings. Like these are crew in media and NRL. And so they're just like, it's just, get to see everyone all at once and they know how to party. You know what I mean? Like they party hard.
Totally.
And I was just like, well, if I can get through that month, like the year will be a breeze. And so I just fully lent into it. And I was like, if I'm going to stop drinking, I'm not going to be that guy that secludes himself and just not goes anywhere.
Oh, totally.
I think if you're going to do it, you still have to be going out. You still have to be doing that.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I really enjoy it. Like I'll go out, I'll have the best conversations with crew, especially late at night and they've had a couple of drinks and they're probably a little bit more willing to open up. And maybe because I'm like on socials and podcasts as like a mental health guy, like they're more willing to have these type of conversations with me. Maybe, but the alcohol definitely like takes a barrier and the walls down. And so you have these amazing conversations with crew. They're talking about things that they're really struggling with. You know, when you have the D&Ms like late at night and whenever, you're having these conversations and usually people just forget about it because you're so blind. But then the next day I'm like, I don't forget. Like I'm fully sober. I remember everything. And to be honest, it's a great chance to check in with crew. It's a great chance to follow up to make sure that they're okay. And it's funny that they need the alcohol to give them the permission to be able to have those types of conversations. So to answer your question, I love it. And then also,
and how come you stopped?
I stopped for a few reasons. Like all the concussions. I had a heap of concussions. Obviously, medically retired. And drinking isn't that great for brain health. Surprise! You know what I mean? So drinks, and I was like, I've been drinking for over 10 years. You know what I mean? And so I was like, it's probably time to give my brain a break. And similar to yourself, like I want to see how good I can get. You know, and I know that this is a busy time. You know, it's, you know, I've got all these things going on and I don't think I'd be able to get the volume of work done if I was missing every Sunday or every Monday. And even when you drink on a Saturday, you're still groggy Monday, Tuesday, you know what I mean? And I could go out on a Saturday night, Friday night. I'm training early the next morning with crew. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Best?
It's the best. You feel so good. So the training was I guess the volume of work was one. I guess I just had like a few things that happened last year that probably weren't great. Like I was engaged, that broke down, and I was like, well, I want to be like the best version of myself, and I want to, you know, like we talked about the ceilings and not having ceilings and thinking big picture, and I was just like, how big of an impact can we make, and how good can we go? And drinking is just going to limit that.
Yes.
And I had some really key conversations. A guy by the name of Cooper Chapman, he did he's got an incredible mental health and sport podcast. He's a former professional surfer. Like, look him up. You should actually have him on the podcast. He's got an incredible story. But he did a year sober, and I jumped on his podcast, and we were talking about it, and I was super curious, you know?
Yes.
And for me, I never thought I could be that guy that couldn't drink because I love drinking. I felt like I was more myself when I was drinking. Like the person that you saw that walked into the room and like was able to talk to everyone. I felt like I could only do that when I was drinking.
Yeah.
But now I'm not drinking. It's just my normal self. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
Nice.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Okay, that's really cool. So before we kind of wrap up, I've actually got sort of two more questions for you.
Good.
One, where you're an athlete yourself and you have daily conversations, and even on your podcast now, you get to interview incredible athletes. I'm really curious about how they operate, how they think. Like, what are some of those like commonalities or traits or values that they have that has sort of given them that level of success? Like, what do they have something in common?
Yeah, they're all obviously incredible workers. Like they're hardworking. Everyone that's come onto the podcast, like they're not only the best athletes in their chosen field, they're also incredible people, but they all work hard. Like I don't think you can't
louder on that. Can we just take a moment for that? Can we not underestimate hard work?
It's so wild to think about, and it comes back to that conversation of people just wanting things straight away.
Yeah,
it's like no, like I'm like. Even for the podcast, for psychology, for everything. So I'm willing to work for 10 years to get to where I want to do, you know, and that comes with time and it comes with hard work. It's like people are just thinking that they're just going to rock up and just expect things to happen. It's a pet peeve of mine. It's like walk into a job where it's just like, you know, I want 150 grand a year. I was like, all right, well, show me why you're worth that much.
Totally.
You know, like I'm happy to pay that, but show me why you're worth that much. It's a pet peeve of mine. But I think another common trait is that they just know what they want. You know, they're so dialed in, and the Olympians, they're probably the best at that. Like Mac Horton, he was the first podcast we had on. Ariana Titmus, who I think she obviously just qualified for the Olympics, world record holder. She'll do incredible at the Olympics. Alexa Leary, Paralympian, who had the traumatic brain injury on her bike, and she's got such an incredible story. But all these guys, you talk AFL players, NRL players, they all just know what they want. And they're so dialed in, and they're happy to say no to things. Like they just I don't know how else to wrap it up instead of just saying they know what they want, and they're just so narrow-minded into that.
100%. Oh, I love this so much, because something I also heard you say is that when you played footy, everything came second to footy. That was sort of your priority.
Yeah.
And I love that you own that, and you're like, I'm proud of that. I love that I chose to like fully commit to this, and everything else got to come second. And I'm sure that there are some like, you know, downsides to that as well, but you were so set on striving towards that, you know, outcome and that goal. And I feel like it's the same. And like now with your podcast or whatever you're doing, like it's that long term, you know where you are going. And then like if we show up and we work hard and we control the things we can control, we detach from the things we can't control, we're going to get there.
I think you hit the nail on the head. When you know what you want, I think that's probably 70, 80% of it. It's just like figuring out what you want. And then you can work backwards from that. Like when I was a kid, when I was 16, as soon as I signed my first NRL contract at 17, I could imagine myself, like I could feel myself playing in the NRL. Like I would go to, and they call it manifestation now, but like I didn't know what that meant back then. But I would just dream and like feel running out. I would feel like the collision, and I loved it, and I could see it.
Goosebumps.
Yeah. But it's fun. Like I could genuinely feel what it was like, and then I just worked myself back from that moment. So it's like, well, I want to play in the NRL. What are the steps I need to take? And then even now, like again, we talk about manifestation. I just think of it as like dreaming and just what I do before bed. I can genuinely see like the podcast being one of the biggest sporting podcasts in Australia, and I can see traveling the world, and I feel very comfortable. Like I think I was telling you before, like the first big speaking event that I did, or that I was like hosting and interviewing, was with Whoop, who's a $3.6 billion company. It's my first one. shitting myself.
Standards. I love that.
But I walked into this thing and I was just like, part of me was just like, I'm so like out of my depth here. Like this is a global brand. Like they've got guys like LeBron and Michael Phelps and Cristiano Ronaldo. Like these are the best athletes in the world. No, don't you dare put me on that. But it was just like, these are the incredible crew.
Yeah,
and I'm like, well, I get to be a part of that. And then I was like, well, these are the steps. Like I can genuinely feel it. Like I know it's going to happen.
What does it feel like?
What does
it feel like in your body? Because I'm just like, let me just jump in here for a second, because I speak about being able to shift your state. So everything that I see in my mind's eye, like in terms of what I want to do, I feel it.
Yes.
Like I feel it in my body when I walk up on that stage, when I have these conversations, when I kick that goal, when that happens, like I feel it. And when I visualize it, I even see it, like the angle, I see it in my mind. Like I see everything in detail, right?
Yes.
I get the feelings and I put myself in a state and I'm there, it's happening.
Yeah.
What I do in that moment is that I anchor in to how it feels, because I'm big on aligning myself with that frequency and those emotions, like on a daily basis. So for instance, I've got a background in dancing, used to be on stage a lot. I love speaking on stage. This stage is like, give me a microphone and I shall speak, right? Yeah. What I love about that, it gives me the same feeling like when I dance. So what I visualize in my mind's eye when I stand there on stage, even though I'm not dancing, I get the same feelings in my body when I dance. Yeah. So the way I align myself with that vision is through dancing. So I speak often about being able to shift your state, because we spend a lot of time in our heads. And I'm like, if you can drop that into your body and align the emotions, you connect with that vision, that's when you quantum leap. Are we speaking the same language?
Oh my God, we're so, everything that you just said, I'm just nodding and I'm like, oh my God, that's exactly how I feel. Yeah. But you said something really great. It's like you're seeing the details. Like you're literally seeing the exact details of and that puts you in that state. And then from there, you work back. What are the steps to take it back? It's like, okay, that's the goal. That's where I want to get to. What are the 5 years, 3 years, 2 years, 12 months,
Love
3
reverse
months?
engineering.
And just reverse engineer it back. And I was like, well, what do I need to step? Who are the people I need to meet? What do I need to put out? And it's just time. And knowing that you're not in a rush. You can't be in a rush. Enjoy the journey, because that's where you're going to have the most fun. Settle in, because it's going to be it's going to be a good 5-10 year thing plus.
And do you know what I think as well? As much as we are speaking about who do I need to become and who do I need to be, something that I also anchor into is what do I need to unbecome? Sometimes we hold on to certain beliefs, traits that, if that's drinking or if that's internal dialogue or, how we are showing up, right? If I know there may be certain traits that are not necessarily going to align with my vision or what I want to call in. So sometimes I go, actually, I might need to unbecome or undo certain traits or beliefs in order for me to get to where I want to be. So for instance, if my internal dialogue is I am little Rebecca from a small country town, I don't have a big voice, no one's going to listen to me, I'm not professional. Yeah. For as long as I believe that to be true, it's probably not going to happen, right? If I keep feeding that evidence or what I believe to be true, if you look at our brains, right, it's if I believe something to be true, if I keep feeding my brain that this is my reality, I feel like I will keep seeing that evidence until I create something new, right? So I'm big on replacing with something greater. It's replacing with something else.
Yeah, love. It's kind of almost fake it till you make it almost, because I look at the replacing thing. Media and public speaking wasn't a huge strength of mine. When I was playing footy, I was always the guy that stepped away from the media. I was I would get the guys, it's Keegs, you up for media? I was like, I don't want to do that. I felt like I stumbled. I wasn't that well at getting my thoughts and being able to articulate them well. And that's obviously a trained thing. And then now when you come into a podcast, especially when you first start the podcast and you start doing speaking engagement, the Whoop event was a perfect example. You're nervous. But I felt like I put on, not a mask, because I feel like it's more of a authentic version of myself, but I would come out and I would just be confident and and I would just go and I would just
oh, I like this. Okay,
You'd almost put on I don't want to say it's a mask, because I feel like it's more the version that I kind of want to be, but it's you put on this thing where it's just you're talkative and you interact with people And then that just becomes your new normal.
Yes,
and it's kind of
totally.
like it's like the replacing thing.
Yes.
And so when you're in the crowd, you might start looking at certain athletes and you start calling them out and you make them feel welcome. And then when they're welcome, it's like you feel comfortable because you've sort of owned the stage. And it's just like you can apply that to any sort of situation. If you're in a business meeting, if you're out at a Valley event, or if you're at sort of any sort of thing, talking to coaches, talking to business mentors, like you put yourself in that, I don't know, environment, you're like, oh, well, this is actually my
You got to get the
normal
reps
now.
in, right?
Yeah.
You got to do something. You got to do something over and over and over again. And I don't think you're not going to show up on like day one and perhaps like feel confident.
Yeah.
But like I'm really big on to be like, do the thing anyway. The confidence will come. Like just do the thing anyway. And I think clarity on your vision, like you said, it's like knowing where you want to go. Then if you have fear come up, you'll move through it because you're so anchored into what you've seen, right? So I think that's how you navigate moving through it. Now, before we wrap up, I'm just curious because I feel like you're on this huge trajectory of growth and this next, year to 5, 10 years, they're going to be huge for you. I can see it for you and I feel it. And I feel like the work that you are doing is so incredible and so important. What's in the future? What's ahead?
What's coming up?
What's coming up?
There's some exciting things coming up. Like I want to do really well in my studies. I want to be ingrained in my studies. So I've got like these things. I want to have like high distinctions in my study. That's a goal. A really exciting thing is that we're going over to America this year in August and September. We're going to do Boston and LA, like I mentioned before. So these are things that are just such cool opportunities that I can't say no to. But I guess the goals for us is just to keep growing, keep having these like really great, authentic conversations with the best athletes in Australia. Like I said before, like I genuinely think that we'll be the biggest sporting podcast in Australia with global presence. I want to, when we go over to the States and we'll be bouncing around, it'll be like, okay, well, when you come to Australia, like Keegan and Company is a sport podcast. Like,
100%.
and that's, and I'm fully aware that that's probably 5-10 years away. Like I understand that, but it's like we're already going global. We're not even a year old. Like we're already spending time in Boston, LA, probably UK as well, London and Manchester as well. We'll get some podcasts in over there. So it's just like, I'm just settling in, and I'm just enjoying it. And to be honest, like I can't thank you enough for having me on this platform because I've enjoyed. This is probably one of my favorite podcasts that I've been on. To be honest, you're an incredible host, and obviously, you've done the reps. Like you obviously speak to camera solo, so I feel like if you can do that solo, I guess it'll be so much easier. But that's what we're looking forward to.
No, that is amazing. And how can my listeners best support you?
Probably just listen. Like it's obviously very sporting focused, so like liking, subscribing is obviously like the best way to support us. We're on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, Keegan and Company on Instagram. That they're our sort of best where we live, I suppose. And I think we're just everything's different. Like we've got a bunch of different sports and different topics resonate with different people, whether it's losing a family member to suicide, or it might be around body image, or it might be around balance, the work-life balance. Every conversation is different, which I think why it's so special.
And last but not least, as individuals and as a society, and just breaking the stigma around mental health, what is one thing we can do as individuals to simply break that stigma and just starting to have more of those really important conversations?
I think the best thing that we can do is just like talk to friends and family, like ask how they're doing and be genuine. Like of course it's easy to ask like, are you okay? Like how are you? But then almost asking again was just like, no, like how are you really? Like talk to me what's happening. How's the family? How's life? How's business? How's your work? And being genuine in that. And people can tell when you're genuine. People can tell when you're not,
for sure.
So I think the best way to destigmatize it, especially in males, because I think females are probably a little bit better at talking about what's going on than males, but in both parts, just being open to asking, but then also open to sharing. And I found that when I'm more vulnerable about my own experiences, people are more likely to be vulnerable with me.
Ooh.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing that I've learned over the last year is like, because you have these little things about you don't want to open up about certain things, and there's some things that I won't talk about publicly.
Of course,
but then like when you are open, vulnerable about your own experiences, it's like it's weird. It's like the wall goes down and you've got this connection with someone, and it actually builds a better, more deeper friendship, I think.
It's almost like if you want someone to talk, start speaking. Yeah.
Clip that. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I have so enjoyed this conversation, and I feel like you're my first ever interview.
I'm so happy that we did this. Like, I genuinely think you're going to do some incredible, like, you're already doing incredible things in this space. I genuinely can't wait to listen to the types of conversations, because you're going to have such a variety of crew on board.
Yeah.
And like I said before, you're such a great host. So I can't wait to sit on the sidelines and watch.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Okay, that is it for this week's episode. We are going to put all of Keegan's details in the show notes below. Make sure that you like and subscribe. We value you coming back to the podcast every single week. Thank you for being here and for tuning in and for bringing your incredible energy to each one of my episodes. I'm so grateful. Boom.
Oh, well done. That was so sick. How you feeling?
So good.
Yeah, you smashed that.